Welcome everyone to this mini-series about Agentic Engineering, specifically about Svelte. Now today's episode will be a bit different from the other ones because the other ones were basically recorded in one session. But today's episode is all about harness curation. So how your harness must evolve with your code base. We're going to talk about when to put stuff inside Agents.md, when to write custom agents, when to write custom skills. However, harness curation is not something that you can make a toy example out of. And so this episode will basically be a collection of a lot of small snippets when I found something that could improve our harness, and I will explain how that fit into the harness curation strategy. Before we begin, a small presentation is due. I'm Paolo Ricciuti and I lead the Svelte team at Mainmatter, which is an engineering consultancy that specializes in Svelte, Rust, Ember, and we help our clients to go through their toughest challenges with those languages or even adopt them in the first place. Most importantly, we have helped a lot of customers to set up their systems so that their engineer can ship code faster without compromising on code quality. And that's basically what we are doing right now with agents, because agents ship a lot of code and we care about code quality. So we are applying the same engineering techniques to our agents so that we can get the productivity boost of the AI without compromising on code quality. Let's see what this episode is all about. So the very first change that I made to my harness was building a custom skill. Something that I noticed while working on the project was that the AI was very keen to introduce a lot of magic numbers, specifically in CSS. And so I wanted to stop that, and I could have just added a small rule to the Agents.md. But this is something that is a bit more complex. Like I need to explain the AI what to do instead of using magic numbers. And I don't want to include that every single time the AI is working on a TypeScript file, for example. So what I did is I prompted the agent to write its own skill, and then what you will see is me reviewing the skill, changing something that I don't probably like, and then adding that to the Agents.md so that I don't have to write every single time, please use this skill if you're writing CSS. So let's see how it went. What we are doing right now is that we are creating a new skill that we can prompt the agent to use whenever it needs to write CSS, and that will tell the agent like what not to do, specifically use magic number, and where to look for the information about spacing, about stuff like that. We'll see what GPT 5.4 creates. Something that I want to do is that I want to specifically refer to the layout.css file. The reason you want to link to a file rather than copy the information is that you don't want those to get out of sync, and the agent will just have the ability to read that file if it needs. So it's much better to, instead of saying this is the available tokens and stuff like that, you can just say this is the file where our design system is defined. Something that we absolutely want to do is also touch about convention, like for example, I prefer using rem instead of pixel. We might want to also add a rule to Agents.md that say, hey, take a look at this skill if you are writing CSS. So let's take a look at what the agent did. So obviously it created also a license, which is not really needed. So we can remove that, but what we are interested in is the skill. So let's see, design system tokens. Use this skill when editing styles in this repo. It explains the shared design system token in source layout CSS and direct agents to replace hard-coded magic number with design system values before introducing new ones. We can remove the license, we don't care. There's a procedure already as a shared editorial design system in layout CSS. When you touch style, treat that file as the source of truth. What to read first? Read layout CSS before making any styling changes. Learn the existing token families and reuse them everywhere possible. Inspect the files you plan to edit plus nearby components to understand current convention before changing values. Yeah, I don't like this available token. Use this existing token first. like this will get out of sync and it can just confuse the agent. So what I want to say is read the file to find out about the available tokens. When you find a magic number that matches the design system, replace it with the corresponding token instead of leaving row literally in place. Replace spacing like 16 pixel, 1 RAM, 0.5 with the matching S token. Replace row text size with blank. Replace hard-coded shared color and font families with existing. How to explore for magic number. Search the relevant codebase areas before editing. Check everything's style block and CSS file for row pix, RAM, M color, blah blah blah, and hard-coded form. Prioritize repeated values and values that clearly map to existing token. Review nearby files for existing token usage so your edit follow the local pattern. Do not replace values blindly. Keep values that are structural or semantic rather than design token candidates such as percentage, viewport units, FR, auto, min-max, or one-off transform that do not correspond to the token scale. Yeah, I like this. Do not map a value to a token that changes the design just because it is close enough. I would say that this is actually something that you have to do. So I would remove this part because the point is that you want your design system to feel coherent. So if a repeated or important design value does not have a good token yet, add a new token in layout CSS instead of introducing another row magic number in a component. Follow the existing name scheme and scale. Prefer extending the system only for values that are clearly reusable, not for every one-off measurement. And we can add something like, but prefer existing tokens over one-off literals to make the design feel coherent instead of having a lot of unique values. Explore the target files and nearby components, replace magic number. If necessary, add a missing reusable token, then reuse it. Keep the final result visually equivalent unless the task explicitly asks for a redesign. The goal is consistently reuse and a tighter design system, not churn. Let's remove this. Okay, so now we have this skill, and again, as you can see, this is something that is very important. Like, this skill is very tied to our code base. Like, we would never share this skill with the external world because it's very tied to our own repo. It's talking about our layout CSS, it's talking about our tokens. So this is something that it's important to keep in mind. When you think about a skill, you might think, okay, that's something that is just like an NPM package, so I have to make that as generic as possible. But the truth is that those are not NPM packages. Those are files that are and can be relevant only to your code base. So don't feel ashamed if you write a skill just like this one, which is specific for your code base. I also want to make another change, and the reason why I want to make this change is because you have seen during these days of work that that's a problem that the AI constantly gets wrong. Now, we could try to force this with an ESLint rule, for example, so that if there is some magic value inside the style part of the component or inside the CSS file, we yell at the system. However, in this case, the static analysis that we can perform on CSS is just too rough to be able to detect a magic number because the concept of a magic number is not well defined. And it's much better to instead add something to your agents.md. So like this is the first rule that we're gonna add, and we're gonna add something like when editing CSS files and styles. If I can write, and styles. And now we can say whenever you are editing CSS and styles in a Svelte component, reuse the design system token, design system tokens skill to know how to properly use this project design system. So basically this small sentence here now will be included every time we send a prompt. So at the beginning of every new session, this will be included. Now, as you can see, this is not a huge amount of tokens, and we are not saying always use this skill. So if we are only touching TypeScript file, we are literally just adding this few bunch of tokens, but this should hopefully make the future of our generation more consistent in terms of CSS and design system. So this was a very powerful technique, some sort of progressive disclosure of something that we want to tell to the agent. We create a skill that is hidden, and then we add something to the agent.md that just reference that skill and tell the agent when to load that actual skill. Now, not always you have to do something like this. If the agent is missing some knowledge and it needs that knowledge regardless of what part of the codebase is touching, well, then it makes sense to just add that as a small sentence inside your agents.md. Let's see how it went. Right now, it's not been the first time that we provide the Chrome MCP to be able to navigate, and the agent is flabbergasted by the fact that he navigates to /editions and is taken back to the sign-in page. And sometimes is smart enough, like Opus was smart enough to figure out that, hey, maybe I need to register, and it asks me for the credential. But I guess we can create like a test credentials and provide them through the agents.md. Or we can say, like, if you can't log in with those test credentials, just register yourself. So let's actually go ahead and update the agents.md once again. So we can say login credential. When using the Chrome MCP to visit the website, you will need to be authenticated. Every authenticated route will redirect back to / in case you are not authenticated. You can log in with username, with email, test@test.com, and password like this. If you can't log in with these credentials, feel free to register. Done, and then log in. So, as you can see, inside your agents.md, you shouldn't put stuff that the agent can absolutely infer from the code base. You should just add stuff that you see the agent gets wrong. So in this case, we've seen the agent multiple times being flabbergasted by the fact that it was trying to navigate to a certain page and it found himself in another route. So we are explaining here what's happening, and we are also explaining that you can use this credential to log in, and if you can't log in, feel free to register with those credentials. So in the future, it does not have to guess what it has to do. So in this clip, I kind of say something that I think it's very important, but I said it kind of like throwing that away, which is you shouldn't put something in your agents.md that the agent can just infer from the code base. A lot of tools, and OpenCode is one of these, provide some sort of init command that will prompt the agent to write an agents.md for you with all the information about the code base, like which tools are you using, if you're using TypeScript or JavaScript, which framework you are using, and stuff like that. Well, that's not really useful because the agent can already see inside the code base the kind of framework that you are using, if you are using TypeScript or JavaScript. Like all of these things are things that the agent can already infer from the code base. So by default, you shouldn't put those inside agents.md. Now, sometimes you will notice that despite some information being there, the agent will blatantly ignore that. And the next clip is just one of those occasions. So let's see how it went. Let's change this. Is it actually running? Yeah, it's not. This is something that I absolutely hate. And so this is something that we absolutely need to add to our agent.md. Something that I've noticed the AI doing a lot is creating their own migration from scratch, basically. And that's very bad because like Drizzle provide a way to create the migrations, and we shouldn't create the migration for them. So I'm gonna steer the agent right now, but also we need to add this to our agents.md. So don't create migrations by hand. Please use the drizzle, like the provided scripts in package.json. And let's also update our agents.md, because this is something that it's doing a lot. So creating drizzle migrations. While working, if a migration needs to be created, you should use pnpm-db generate and pnpm-db migrate rather than handcrafting a migration file from scratch. Once again, we are updating our agents.md every time we find some behavior that our agents consistently gets wrong. Something that I've noticed multiple times is that when it needs to create some migration, it just likes to handcraft a migration file. That's bad because you want to rely on the migration tool from Drizzle. So there are scripts that are basically created for this very purpose, and so we should tell the agent to always use these scripts instead of handcrafting them. Now, up until this moment, we just updated our harness with a new skill or a new part of the agents.md whenever we had a problem with the agent. Now, that's not always the case. If you are introducing a new library, for example, and this library is new enough that the agent will not know about that because of its cutoff date, well, very often library authors will ship their own skill so that they can teach the agent on how to use their library in the best way possible. And that's exactly what we did now. We introduced 2 new packages, and with the packages came 2 new skills. Let's see how it went. We talked before about skills. If we go into .agent, we installed the front-end design skill, but we also created the skill to describe our design system token. Now, obviously, creating a new skill is not something that you definitely need to do if someone else did it for you. So in this case, we know that we want to use workflow and sandbox from Vercel. And if you go to skills.sh, you can search for workflow. And obviously there is a workflow skill. So we can copy this and we can install the skill to teach our agent how to use workflow. We want to do it on a project level, proceed. Yeah, I think it's safe. Okay, and so that's it. And then we also want, Vercel sandbox. Yeah, seems like that's the one that we want. So we can do this. We can install the Vercel sandbox skill. All is fine, project, and proceed. Yes. Okay, so now we have these 2 new skills at our disposals that basically will teach our agent how to use Vercel workflow and Vercel skills. So this time we installed the skill from skills.sh, so we didn't write a custom one, and most importantly, we didn't touch the agents.md. The reason is that instead of CSS, which is more broadly used inside a front-end application, workflow and Vercel sandbox are a much smaller part of our code base. And so what we can do is just mention the skill during the prompt when we are working on that part of the code base, or most likely we will already mention using Vercel sandbox or using Vercel workflow, and so the agent should be able to pick them up automatically. Now the next changes to agents.md is something that a lot of people have experienced as a pain, and I'm surprised that more agents doesn't automatically come with this knowledge, but agents really love to launch their own processes. So we really didn't like that, and so we said, you know what, let me tell the agent every single message. Let's see how it went. We had to specify multiple times that the dev server is running on localhost 5173, don't start the web server. So that's another very good candidate for Agents.md. So using the Chrome MCP. When using the Chrome MCP to validate your work, don't launch a new dev server. The dev server is likely already running on localhost 5173. If it's not, just ask the developer to run it. So that's a nice little addition. And a nice little addition it was indeed, old me. Well, after that moment, we finally were able to just access localhost 5173 without the agent trying to run it on a separate port with problems to the authentication and stuff like that. Now, the reason why this was a good addition to the Agents.md is because you really have no other point where you can intercept the command that the agent is trying to run. At least not without doing a lot of parsing, figuring out if it's the command that you are interested in. So like there are a lot of extra corollary action that you should do if you want to do it in a proper static analysis way. It's just much easier to tell the agent through the Agents.md. Something similar, and I actually touch on that exactly like how we did it right now, it's in the next clip, because once again, the agent was not able to infer from the codebase that it should use the script in the package.json. You figured? Well, let's see how it went. I noticed that whenever I ask the agent to add an end-to-end test, it is running the playwright script by hand. And to be fair, it is doing it to pass a filter option. That said, I still don't like the fact that by default it's running the CLI without going through the package.json scripts. So I want to add something specifically for that. So running CLIs. If you find yourself in the situation of having to run a CLI like playwright or vtest, please check if there is an available script in package.json, because the script might do some extra work needed to properly set up the environment before running the CLI. Okay, so what we are adding to the Agents.md is that if you ever need to run a CLI like vtest or playwright, please check if there is an available script in package.json, because the script might do extra work to set up the environment. Like if we check in the package.json, you will see that there is a script, which is pm test end-to-end, for example, which is using .env. It's also doing drizzlekit push force and .env test playwright test. So like this is using .env, it is passing the specific file, is doing drizzlekit push force, like it's doing all sorts of stuff to setting up the environment so that the test can pass easily. And something that we've noticed is that the agent was not looking at this, and it was straight up running pm exec. Now, why this is a good addition to Agents.md? Well, because the problem is that we don't have really a way to interject the commands that the agent is running. We could write a plugin, but I mean, the point is, like, then you need to parse the command to figure out if it's trying to run it separately. Sometimes it's good that it's running separately because it might want to run a filtered version of this command. So like, this is why it's a good candidate for your Agents.md, because this way the agent will know that it needs to check the package.json to see if there are any available scripts. And even if then wants to write a filtered version of that script, it still knows all the steps that that specific script is doing inside the script. So he knows that he has to run with .env.test. He knows that he has to push the DB with drizzlekit, and it can run that in a better way. So that's why it's a good choice for the Agents.md. Now, up until this moment, we mostly touched skills, Agents.md, but depending on your harness, in this case open code, you can do much more. So in the next clip, I will show how I created a custom agent to help me understand the plans that we built together with our agent. So let's check out what we did. One of the skills that we used most while building this news aggregator was this one, Grill Me from Matt Pocock. This is a very simple skill. It's like 5 lines of markdown, no extra scripts, nothing. But it's very interesting because if you read, it's basically saying, interview me relentlessly about every aspect of this plan until we reach a shared understanding. Walk down each branch of the design tree, resolving dependencies between decisions one by one. For each question, provide your recommended answer. Ask the question one at a time. If a question can be answered by exploring the codebase, explore the codebase instead. So this is a simple skill that basically teaches the agent to keep asking you questions about the plan so that you can't avoid the edge cases and the agent will have a more comprehensive understanding of the plan. Now, while we were using this, one of the things that I was kind of lamenting was the fact that in open code, I can switch to plan mode and I can build a plan, and the plan is saved to a markdown file. What I would do then is either switch to build mode or stay in plan mode and invoke the skill to then roast the plan that we just wrote. Now the issue is that if I switch to build mode, then the agent still is able to modify the code before I approve the plan. If I stay in plan mode but I start a new session to save on context, then the issue is that the agent is not able to change the old plan. So it would write a new plan, but then when I switch to build mode, I need to reference 2 files and it gets a bit more annoying for the agent. And while working on this, I was thinking like, you know what? This is the perfect opportunity to build an agent, not a sub-agent. So we already explored the concept of a sub-agent, which is something that the agent can invoke to save on context for every atomic operation. But then I also talked about agent, like the plan agent or the build agent that are available in open code. Now, these are agents, primary agents, that you, the user, can decide to use, but you can also build one. So you can decide to build a new agent that has a specific set of permission and a specific system prompt. And that's exactly what I did. This is the Grill Me agent. So how to build this? Well, let's switch to the news aggregator page and let's open our opencode.json. Now, this is how you can build your own agent. So this, once again, is not a sub-agent, it's just an agent. So the Grill Me agent, you can specify a color, you can specify a mode, which in this case has to be primary so that you can choose it. And then you just have a description, which is the same description that the skill is using, the prompt, which is the same prompt that the skill is using, and then you can specify this permission object. And as you can see, what I want in this permission is that I want the agent to be able to edit every file inside .opencode/plans/everything. So you are absolutely allowed to modify any edit, and a question tool allow. So basically this allow the agent to just ask me question and change the plan inside our plans folder. So once again, this is a small little things that I really didn't like about my harness, and you can just change it. Isn't that nice? Small interjection from the future. While I still think that the Grill Me skill/agent is very useful when you want to nail down like an implementation and exploring every possible edge cases of it, I was filming something to show you how the Grill Me skill worked, and certain models take interview me relentlessly a little too literally. For example, GPT 5.3, in this example that I'm gonna show you, literally interviewed me for 1 hour, over 90 questions, and it actually asked me stuff that it was really not worth spending time on. So my future advice for you is, if you want to use the grill me skill or the grill me agent, feel free to do it. Use it possibly with a small tweak, in the sense that, like, specify that you don't want to get asked questions that are silly, and only do it when you actually have time to fulfill that promise, like the interview, and only do it for stuff that actually are worth exploring. So the next clip will be completely sped up because it's just too much, but let's see how it goes. And let's do grill me, and we can do please grill me on plans happyriver.md. Oh my god, we reached the end just when I said, please don't ask me silly question. Yes! Update. Plans with the new findings. And finally, the latest addition to our Agents.md was not something that the agent got wrong, it's actually something that we got wrong. We always forgot to add something specifically to the prompt to prompt the agent to use TDD. That's something that the agent will not do automatically, because why would it do TDD automatically? But we want to do it that way. Now, up until this moment, we just simply wrote, please use the TDD strategy to do that. But there were a few times where I forgot, and then I had to write the test later, and it doesn't really work that way. So I said, okay, you know what? If I constantly forgot about adding that line, well, let's add it to the Agents.md, and let's see how it went. I just finished a couple of sessions with GPT 5.3 codex, and in both sessions, I found myself like sending the prompt and then saying, oh, I forgot to say this. And the thing that I was forgetting to say is that I wanted to say, please write a failing test first and then write the fix for the test. We want the agent to use this TDD approach to build its stuff because, as we said in a previous episode, we want the test suite to grow with the code so that we can keep the agent in check, and the agent will also be able to validate its own work. However, we constantly forgot to tell the agent that we should do that. And this is the perfect addition to the Agents.md, because the Agents.md will always be included, and we can just add a few lines to say that whenever building, please consider this strategy. Now, we can't be mandatory, really, because there are situations where it doesn't make sense to build a test before running the fix, but more often than not, it's useful. So use TDD approach. So what we want is we want to say, whenever building something, unless the user explicitly asks for no test for some reason, you should always use a TDD approach. Write a failing test first so that you can validate that the test itself is correct. Then write the code that fixes that test. This should be true in case the test is a unit test. This should be true whether the required test is a simple unit test, a component test, or even an end-to-end test. in this case, it's not actually a problem of the agent, because it's not something that the agent constantly gets wrong. It's more something that we know that we always want. Like, we always want to build this with this TDD approach, unless we specifically don't want for some reason. For example, in our workflow case, we didn't want test, because writing a test that involves our Svelte sandbox, it's a bit of a mess. So we now have built on top of that a solution to be able to write test. But in general, we always want to use this TDD approach. And since we are constantly forgetting to include this small prompt into our prompt that we are sending to the user, we now added this to the Agents.md so that we can make sure that this will always be included. And what we said is that whenever building something, unless the user explicitly asks for no test for some reason, you should always use a TDD approach. Write a failing test first so that you can validate that the test itself is correct, then write the code that fixes that test. This should be true whether the required test is a simple unit test, a component test, or even an end-to-end test. So with this small inclusion in our Agents.md that now has reached 26 lines, so it's not that big, we now have a better agent that will write a more stable code base, because it will use this TDD approach, constantly adding tests to our test suite so that we and itself can validate the code using testing. And with this, we reach the end of this somewhat weird episode that is time traveling back and forth with me trying to explain what I was missing and stuff like that. Well, I hope you still enjoyed this kind of episode, and obviously these are just a few examples of things that you can write into the Agents.md. I hope that you can extrapolate to use the same strategies into your code base. Obviously, you shouldn't add the workflow skill just because you have the skill. You shouldn't add the Chrome MCP just so that you can write something about the Chrome MCP in your Agents.md. I proposed these examples to you so that you can pick up on why I've added this information inside my Agents.md, and you can relate them to your project to add the right lines to your Agents.md. Thanks for watching, and as usual, if you have any questions about this series or in general, if you need any help with your project, feel free to reach out to mainmatter.com to learn more about what we do and how we can help you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.